Hello, my name is Dr. Ukiri Richard. I'm doing this for Niger people. People is PIPU. And I am going to tell you something about who is not guilty on ground of insanity. In movies and on television shows, a standard legal defense for criminal defendants is insanity or temporary insanity. We also hear about this from time to time in real life, of course, but it is not especially common legal defense. To most of us, the legal reasoning behind this defense is fairly mysterious, even though we probably see it played dozens of times. On a typical lawyer show, the defense lawyer brings a psychologist or a psychiatrist that says that the defendant should not be held accountable for his or her action because he or she has a mental illness that interferes with his or her reasoning capacity. If the jury thinks that the person actually does have a mental problem, it finds him or her not guilty. This raises a number of questions that most of us don't answer very clearly. Why does mental illness excuse one from being guilty? What level of mental illness constitutes insanity? How do you prove someone is or was insane? The main reason that this concept is so confusing is that lawyer shows and press coverage of actual cases often don't clarify the distinction between insanity and mental illness. Insanity and mental disorders are psychiatric concepts, while insanity is a cultural and legal concept. In Nigeria, court of law, as well as in many other countries, Europe, US, America, and other countries, insanity and mental illnesses are related conditions, but they are by no means synonymous. Mental illness at the time of an offense is a prerequisite for not guilty by reason of insanity, but legal insanity is not simply a judgment of whether or not a person has mental illness. The law varies from state to state, but in most courts that recognize the insanity defense, someone is found to be legally insane if he or she meets one of the following conditions. Because of a mental disorder, the defendant did not understand that what he or she was doing was illegal. Because of the mental disorder, the defendant did not know what he or she was doing. And because of the mental disorder, the defendants were compelled to commit the crime by an irresistible force. So why is the person who meets this condition not guilty of the crime? The reasoning is actually based on one of the most fundamental tenets of justice system in Nigeria and in many other countries. With most offenses, a person is only guilty of a crime if he or she actually intended to commit the crime. If you accidentally bump into my car, for example, you are not guilty of assault. You will be guilty if you bumped into my car intentionally in exactly the same way. The action is the same, but you have not committed the crime because you didn't intend to do it. You may be guilty of a lighter crime, for example, reckless driving, but not of assault, because there was no intention in it. Mental illness can alter a person's conception of reality so that he or she does not realize the criminal nature of what his or her action, or has no choice but to commit the crime. When this is the case, certain courts believe that the person lacks the element of intention necessary for criminal guilt. To prove legal insanity, the defense must provide credible expert testimony that says how the defendant is or was mentally ill, and then explain why this sort of mental illness means that the defendant did not intend to commit a crime. The jury does not decide whether the defendant is mentally ill. It determines whether or not the defense expert testimony has demonstrated this fact, and then decide whether or not the mental disorder meant that he or she did not intend to commit a crime. Mental illness alone is not a defense. A person who suffers from deep psychosis will still be considered guilty if he or she commits a crime intentionally. I have definitely gotten you wiser on this topic. If you have better topic for my podcast series, please email it to ukiririchard@yahoo.de. Don't forget this podcast is for Niger people, PIPU.com.